A very good evening and welcome to one and all present here for the international webinar series DENTOPHARM 2022 on topic Research in Basic Medical Sciences, a boon for medical students. I'm Dr. Ramya, part of Dental Education Unit and Senior Lecturer at Sri Balaji Dental College and Hospital. Will be highlighting you about this program today. I would like to welcome our chairperson, Dr. Sri Nisha ma'am, Registrar Dr. Bhuminathan sir, Principal Dr. Jimson sir, and Dr. Sumati Jones ma'am, Head of the Department of Pharmacology at Sri Balaji Dental College and Hospital. Over to Sumati ma'am to share a few words on today's webinar.
Welcome to DENTOPHARM webinar series. Today we have Dr. Deepa with us, eminent anatomist. She'll be discussing with us today about recent researches in basic medical science. We all know that basic medical science research has paved way for numerous discoveries, novel drugs, and so on. So, ma'am will be discussing in detail about this. Over to Ramya again.
Just a little announcement before we start the webinar. So if you have any queries during the presentation, you can type in the comment box and later we'll have the discussion. I now warmly welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Deepa, who is Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Anatomy, Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences in Quest International University at Malaysia. She bagged gold medal and university first rank during her master's in human anatomy from Dr. ALM Postgraduate Institute of Basic Medical Sciences. Later, she pursued her PhD from CMC, Vellore, Tamil Nadu. Dr. Deepa has publications in various international journals and also has a copyright on her work entitled Physio, a pedagogical model approach to sequential learning of anatomy in medical curriculum, and a patency on process of extraction of neuroprotective function exhibiting active biomolecule eugenol from Saraswata Ishtam and product therefore. She's a well experienced teacher in her field with 22 years of teaching experience. She also initiated anatomy lectures in YouTube channel and well versed in preparing competitive clinical oriented assessments, developed plans for students of undergraduate in medical and dental field. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Ramya. So, good evening, one and all, and a very pleasant evening to all the young minds, first of all, gathered here. And first, my heartfelt thanks to the institution, Balaji Dental College, and the esteemed guest of honor who have all gathered here. And a special thanks for inviting me to take part and share my knowledge to the young minds who are all interested in research. So, I will just go ahead. And today, the topic of interest is on research in basic medical sciences, a boon for medical students. So research is an integral part of medical education, a very well-known fact. But the question here is why medical and dental students need to know about research or perform research when they are in a medical school. So whenever a research basically is done, it gives you a lot of enhanced new knowledge and new information. And this information is very important to sustain the quality of patient care, especially as doctors. Evidence-based medicine is a new buzzword in the field of modern medicine. Now, this field of medicine, which is new to all the students who have gathered here and to the rest, it works on three important pillars. The first pillar of this evidence-based medicine is an evidence-based research information that you're gathering. Second, it is integrated with a clinician's skill and expertise in the field of medicine in which he is. Put together both, he integrates it and a clinician works to cater the patient's values and preferences to ward off the diseases. So whatever said and done, research has formed an integral part of learning, innovation, as well as even development in any field of medicine. None of us would have forgotten the COVID-19 pandemic and the rapidity which arose because of this. Now, when this rapidity arose among the common population, there were millions of questions on what to follow, when to change, how to be protective, and everybody were holding our breath. But at that point of time, there was a judicious use of information from published literature, and this only gave a very pragmatic approach for clinical decision making. At this point of time, I think if you're aware or not, let me put it forward that in UK, a research recovery trial was conducted at this crucial juncture. And this exact trial was on a published evidence of usage of the dose of dexamethasone, which could just apparently reduce the mortality rate in COVID patients. And later on, the rest became history. You knew that that became the modus operandi in most of the clinical setups. And later on, this use of information that came from published literature took the medical research further forward. So research is definitely important and imperative. If research is so important and so imperative, what do you mean by research? So to all the young minds here, you must be more with a curiosity quotient to do what, when, where, and how. For all those interesting minds, research is the answer because it's an endeavor that you put in all over, especially to identify and solve any scientific query that raises using a proper scientific and statistical measures. Or in other terms, you can even come up with a new fact. Or in other terms, again, you can go back to revise the old theories and the laws which are in any field of medicine. So whatever said and done, anybody who is curious, who is inquisitive, the answer is just research. Now, when there are different kinds of research and when the research is performed in different fields, why is medical research so much of a botheration for all medical students especially? Now, gone are those days where we had encountered some of the deadliest diseases of the past, especially which can range even from a bubonic plague, even to a very crippled infectious poliovirus, or even a very speckled monster-based disease called the smallpox. All these diseases have been totally eradicated and is just only a memory in all the young minds here. Also, because of the medical information and medical research, the impact of the current diseases that you're encountering, be it a heart disease or even diabetes, the impact of all these diseases have relatively come down because of the extensive medical knowledge, medical information, and medical research that has come up. And from a clinician's perspective, a medical research has helped them mainly to enhance the understanding of the molecular mechanisms behind a disease. But when we shift our focus from a clinician to that of a common public, how is he going to be benefited by a medical research? The answer is very simple. In current world, everywhere medical information gives all the information about a disease that is just practically trending in the society, and also the pattern of the disease spread in the society, to so much of an extent that if a patient wants to know where he can get himself treated, there is an information available on the million number of hospitals, and even they've cut down to the level where you know the cost clarity, so where to approach and how to approach. So medical information or science is just served on the platter, both to the public as well as to the clinician. Thanks to all the high quality of medical care, that the luxury that every patient enjoys today, despite the disease suffering, it's all because in the background, there was an enormous effort put by a lot of physician scientists, the physicians, PhDs, postdoc fellows, all allied health professionals and other biomedical experts who have been consistently researching and investigating both the cause of a disease as well as on the potential therapies needed for it. Therefore, it is very clear that a medical research is definitely a big bang in the current scenario. When medical research is such a big bang and there are many people who are already busy at it, next question is, why as a medical student, when I'm already loaded with my medical curriculum and I have n number of things to remember, why is it that I need to experience research? The simple answer for it is, the first important thing is there is an extensive growth in medical knowledge, and this growth keeps increasing. So you get more sharpened with your medical knowledge once you start experiencing research. Just a decade back, it was expected that at least 1 million articles would be published in 2012, and that much would surprise you to tell the amount of medical knowledge information that's growing. What in particular for a medical student, what would be the benefit? The benefit would be honing his skills. And what kind of a skill is that? The main skill that I would like to emphasize is his critical thinking, his critical appraisal about a disease trend and how it is spreading in the society. And above all that, he's taught to ask a lot of questions, reasonable, logical questions. Otherwise, we don't know the art of questioning in research. Apart from all this, there is definitely a spark in the information literacy that he tries to gain so much of knowledge because of research. Now, assuming that a medical student's medical knowledge has improved and his critical thinking skills have also been honed, what next comes in the picture? Of course, research is done and he might come up with a publication output. But even if a publication is done, most of the medical students do not know how will that help them to grow further. A very good medical research performed at a medical school level itself will help definitely a medical student to get into a better opportunities for a residency position. So very demonstrable success of medical research when you are in a medical school itself definitely will take you to good residency positions. So when your professional resume has got an ample amount of research productivity, take it from me, that would definitely be a selling point for every medical dental student here at a global level. Now, for those motivated minds which are here to just listen to this talk, I will just share a couple of information, which is, I don't know whether it's known or not known, but still let me make it known to you. The best research that you can always appreciate is, all of you are aware of this pancreatic islets of Langerhans. Now, this pancreatic islets of Langerhans was a breakthrough discovery by a medical student called Paul Langerhans, who was very much like one among you, who was studying in his medical school and at that time got up into this accidental discovery of islets of Langerhans. The second important discovery, that the word that is every now and then uttered in the field of medicine, is insulin. Now, insulin is again one of the best discoveries of a medical student by name Charles Best when he was just doing a small basic medical science research in a medical school. So definitely you should get a spark of doing research right from when you are a medical student. But then what about the global setup? Now, for example, if you just look into the other countries, for example, Germany. Now, in Germany, an undergraduate medical student cannot be officially called as a doctor unless and until he does a small portion of research, submits a dissertation thesis, and only after that he is graduated as a doctor. Till then, you are not officially even supposed to be called as a doctor. And secondly, 90% of the clinicians in Germany specifically are so interested, they're bent upon taking research, medical research as their career. So I'm sure that should just tell you how important medical research for a medical student right when you're there in the medical school. So medical students should always think only one thing. They should not be very much busy just consuming information which are already dumped in the medical textbooks. They should also be very keen to perform a research, just hone their skills and create a medical information, because the medical information that is created by a student today will become a breakthrough discovery tomorrow in the field of clinical medicine. So what is basically research in basic medical sciences? So that is the key word, the modus operandi towards taking it further to a bedside or a clinical research. And there are different kinds of basic medical science research, and the option list is many. Whether you're interested in traditional disciplines of anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, or jump into microbiology, hematology, histopathology, or pharmacology, the carpet is yours. You can take it forward and explore your interest in any of these fields of basic medical sciences. What is the assert when you do a research just specifically in basic medical science? Let us not extend it further to any other fields of medicine, only in basic medical science. The first thing is a person who is wetting his hands in the laboratory as a basic medical science research, that becomes the preliminary prerequisite for you to progress further in a clinical research. Your understanding basically deepens. But is that all enough? No. When people are having the luxury of doing research in basic medical sciences, there are two roaring emerging fields of medicine that I would like to introduce to you students at this point of time. One is the field of genomics, a field where they worked so much on the evolution, the formation, and most important, mapping of genes, especially for a set of genetic disorders. You name it, right from Alzheimer's to Parkinson's, everything has been gene mapped. They have even gone one step ahead of it to find out successful therapy methods for which they have even identified proteins which are coding for these specific genes. And now they are busy interested working on how it works in a normal molecular and cellular process. So this is a very roaring field, a gateway to personalized medicine. No more medicine is given on a common community or in a cluster. Now medicine has become one-to-one. Drug dosage correction, whether it is right from checking whether you are predictably susceptible to any genetic diseases, everything is coming under the field of genomics. And students who enroll themselves in basic medical sciences have got this brilliant opportunity to take it forward in genomics. Apart from genomics, I want you to get introduced to another roaring field of medicine, which is called the translational research. Now, what is translational research for many minds who have gathered here? It's all about correlating your clinical medicine or your entire bedside research to a bedside research. So this complete link will favor you to move on to access even clinical samples. So a medical student who's doing a basic medical science research could not even think at that point of time to access clinical samples. But when you are into a translational research idea, then automatically you get very good access to clinical samples, even clinical history of the patient. Everything is at your disposal when you are in the field of this translational research. And take it from me, translational research is one of the key concepts to take you forward for very fast-paced discoveries. When you know so much about research in general, it would be incomplete if I would not share you on what are the categories of research and how will you go forward, because each mind here would be inspired in a different field of medicine. So for all of you collectively, I would just tell you that there are primary as well as secondary research categories. Now you can just spark up your minds to find out where you really fit in or to the bin you belong. So there are three primary research categories. One is experimental research, the second is a clinical research, and third is epidemiological research. The word research, you spit it out, it will fall into any of these bins only. So experimental research to begin with is basically wetting your hands in the laboratory, coming up with a thesis or trying to prove a hypothesis. Usually experimental researchers are struggling hard to take it forward at a clinical level. But then what is the advantage of a clinical research complemented with an experimental research? The clinical research basically is where you come up with brilliant ideas for new diagnostic tests, new diagnostic tools, and even new diagnostic therapies. And usually a clinical researcher will go back to test whatever is the hypothesis or whatever is the groundbreaking discovery that was done by an experimental researcher. He will try to bring it and just put it up to check if it is feasible in a healthcare society. The third brilliant kind of research that you have here is epidemiological research. Now, epidemiological research is a research where there is a correlation. The epidemiologists try to find a correlation between the various outcome measures and the variables, and he would also check what are the risk factors when these research variables are put up in the society. And even disease trends are identified in epidemiological research. And take it carefully, epidemiological research always runs with two important pillars. One, an epidemiologist always would be there. And second, there'll be a brilliant medical statistician who will be guiding you through if you're in an epidemiological research. Now, under epidemiological research, you can classify research again into a qualitative and a quantitative research. So all those who have gathered here could actually now think of your research question and just try to tease out to find where do you really belong to. Qualitative research is a research where you don't take it anything numerical. It's very categorical. Say, for example, you just think about a patient's decision on whether he wants to take COVID vaccine or not. So it's either a yes or a no. And most of the qualitative researches, which are undermined by a lot of the research minds, take it that actually qualitative research gives you answers for all those questions which were once upon a time could not be answered in a quantitative research. So that is to do with a qualitative research. Exact opposite is the quantitative research, where it's highly numerical, and definitely there are different types of quantitative research. One first research, basically where most of your epidemiological research fall in this category, is an observational research. You just try to do on an experiment, you get the outcome measures, we cannot intervene anything out of it, you present the outcome variables as such. Now this is an observational research. Now what is this quasi-experimental research? Now quasi-experimental researches are researches where the researcher is finding a lot of difficulty to fit into which category that he has to put up a control group or a patient group, that is a treatment group. So because of this fix in putting up the patients or the controls in certain category, this kind of quasi-experimental researches are conducted. Now it is most common when you do a research on infectious diseases, antimicrobial resistance. These are the kind of researches which come under the quasi-experimental research category. And this quasi-experimental research category, because you cannot distinguish between a control and a treatment group, usually it is at the lowest level of an evidence pyramid. Next is a typical experimental research. A typical experimental research is a research where you formulate a hypothesis, you do systematically a study design, get a result, try to understand the statistical measures and find the famous p-value for it. So that is an experimental research. Experimental research is a very good research in one sense because you can go back to bring the past data that is already collected and kept, and based on that you can perform an experimental research left up to the smart research question that you would start up with. Now this kind of a research, you call it as retrospective research, or you can take it forward with a new idea as a prospective research. And another demanding field of experimental research is cross-sectional research. Most of the students, medical students, when they begin their career in research, they mostly prefer to do a cross-sectional research. A research where you try to identify a particular disease trend at a particular point of time in a particular community. That's exactly what is a cross-sectional research. The next booming field of quantitative research is a prospective research. Now, before getting into all the details, I would just want to highlight the most important ones. The three important ones are a control trial, a cohort study, and a randomized control. Now, in this, two of them are very much good in the evidence pyramid. The first one being the cohort study. Now, what is a cohort study is where you do a research on a large population. So the size of the sample is pretty large. And also you're going to do it for a longer duration of time. Now, when you go for a cohort study, I think every medical student, one way or the other, will be remembering of the Framingham heart study. That was one of the most famous elaborate cohort study, which was done for 10 years on the same group of people. It was followed up continuously, very religiously. It was followed for 10 years. And this study became very famous for the only reason, based on this study only, even today, predictors for the heart diseases and stroke were determined based on this huge cohort study. Another important study that you have is a randomized control trial study. In randomized control study, the researcher will be absolutely blindfolded to find out which participant is in which group, whether he's in the control group or in the treatment group. So both the participant as well as the researcher will be totally blindfolded. That's why randomized control study is one of the most preferred high quality research always. And sometimes it is not only double blindfolded, sometimes the statistician who is going to work on the research as well is also blindfolded about the control and the treatment group. So it becomes a triple blindfolded, and that's why RCT trials are the the cap and the cream of research. So when you take up the evidence pyramid, this is how is the distribution of your research. So the peak of the evidence pyramid talks about two important types of researches. They are called as meta-analysis and systematic reviews. So meta-analysis and systematic reviews are the top tiers of secondary research categories. And other than that, you have the clinical trials. Now, clinical trials are conducted in 4 different phases, and it's a very laborious kind of a research methodology. Crossover trials are very simple trials, but the key point here is the same participant will remain as a control group for a short period of time, and later on the same participant will become the patient over the next period of time. Those kind of trials are the crossover trials. Now, apart from clinical and crossover trials, the best form of research, when you really become very experienced, you can go in for a systematic review or a meta-analysis. Even now, you can join hands with your seniors who are performing these kind of researches. Now, systematic review and meta-analysis is actually taken over by an organization which comes up to handle this kind of a research. It's called the largest Cochrane organization. Now, this Cochrane organization as the leading guidelines, they form the skeletal framework for how a meta-analysis or a systematic review approach has to be done. So they are the people who are the trendsetters for meta-analysis and systematic review even till today. Now, when you know about research so much, research does not run freely without revenue. Revenue and research are close brothers. You cannot, without revenue, conduct any form of research. So we should be aware when we are going to start up with research, especially medical students think that there is no funding for the kind of the research or the preliminary idea that they come up with. The answer is actually no. There is a big S if you have got a research question in you. There are a lot of national grants within our country, and these are some of the famous national grants that you have to definitely know so that you can take them as your resource. The first premier organization in research and development is CSIR, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. Now, this funding organization gives you research in the form of fellowships. You get a JRF, a SRF, a research associate, and a maximum of 20,000 is the income of every researcher when you file up a research under their fellowships. The second one is the DBT, which is the Department of Biotechnology, which also funds you, especially for PhDs and postgraduates. The DST, or the Department of Science and Technology, has got a special scheme called the DST Inspire Fellowship. Now, this DST Inspire Fellowship, take it from me, they give you 7 lakhs per year for consistently 5 years for a good research question when asked. Above all this, there's another key person who's the Indian Council of Medical Research, all government-aided, government-funded ICMR research proposals. Now, ICMR specially caters their research schemes to postgraduates, be it whether it is medical or dental, MD, MDS, PhDs, postdoc fellows, all of them can receive very, very good research grants through ICMR fellowships. But here again, I want to everybody pay attention to this particular kind of a research fellowship called the short-term studentship fellowship, which is again the host being your ICMR. Now, this is a research grant specifically given by ICMR to undergraduate MBBS and BDS students, specifically to undergraduate and BDS students who come with a very beautiful research question, who have a very keen bent on doing research very sincerely and come up with a very good research publication in a high indexed journal. If that is the case and you have achieved this as a medical student, you can apply for the short-term studentship and pursue on your research career as well, provided you continue to pursue your post-graduation as well. If you're selected, you can submit your thesis, and if you're selected and if your thesis is worth and it is evaluated by the ICMR, you will be paid 50,000 cash prize, and this short-term studentship is given for 100 selected students per year, only for undergraduate MBBS and BDS students. So that is a cake, that is a pie on the cake, so you can enjoy it if you really like to do research. Now, apart from that, you have the Tuberculosis Association of India, Department of Health Research, and another famous S. Ramachandran National Bioscience Award for Career Development. Keep all them in mind. They would be definitely beneficial when you are in demand for revenue. Not only national grants help you, we have also international grants, and definitely they are very important. Now, these international grants are the most important ones that I've given you are the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, the Wellcome Trust, of course, the Bill Gates Foundation, Melinda Gates Foundation, then whatever the research fund that you're going to get from your NIH, National Institute of Health, and from the Fogarty International Center. I've also provided the links so that you can just go comfortably and search and find out the ideal resource for you to think of a research question and procure research. The next is the student's perception towards research. We just talked only about research in general, but when a lot of faculty think that students do not have a bent for research, it's a common opinion. But ideally speaking, the student's perception towards research is very healthy, very strong, and very robust, which is a very welcoming thought. So that is a pat on all the young minds who think that research is little on the downfall side. No. Majority of the people globally, all the medical students think research is very awarding, gives you a lot of awareness. It makes you understand and believe that it is very important in a medical curriculum. And they are very, very sure that it has got a very positive achievement in their resume. And of course, the most wanted for the students, the reinforces a lot of team spirit among them. But remember, there are a small group of individuals always among us who will not have a bent for research. It is for those minds that every institution takes a lot of effort to organize these kind of conferences, these kind of webinar series, so that you're constantly exposed to the benefits and best outcomes of research. And even in indexed journals, there are small areas where student presentations can be given. You can write even as letters to the in the form of reviewers comments. You can write back your feedbacks. So there are a lot of avenues for all the young minds. So if these young minds are ignited, definitely everybody will come to understand that research is robust. If research is so fruitful, then this bench reside research and taking it forward to a bedside research, is it an illusion or a reality? Now, bench to bedside research, if you see, it's a very linear progression model. And though we have known that a lot of clinical based researches which have become huge, stupendous success, like for example, usage of penicillin, antibiotics, or insulin, whatever it is, but still on the overall global picture, only 14% of scientific discoveries have efficiently translated from a bench side to a bedside research. So the question now for all the students here is the bench to bedside research a long fairy tale? Will it have a happy ending? Would I do a research and get the results finally? They lived happily hereafter, or would it be a misery? If you want your research to be a long fairy tale with a very happy ending, you need to know some other nuances of research. Now, what are the other nuances of research? The best nuance that you could ever understand is translational research, a very big gateway that can bridge the achievements of basic medical science into clinical practice, especially in this era. Our era is an era of evidence-based medicine. Without evidence, without successful completion, without potential therapeutic developments, your research still will not reach its complete success. Now, this translational research, why is it so advantageous that every medical student should always have a sneak peek into this? Is because it fosters a lot of multidirectional integration. So it can bridge a basic research, you can take it to the patient-oriented research, and you can also integrate it with the general population. So all this together will put up together, it will help you to improve your public health. What about the institutions? When the student knows very well about medical research, when there is so much of information given to you that medical research is very good, then what is the role of an institute? The institute, a medical college or a medical school, plays a major role in definitely honing the skills of a young researcher in their medical school. So how would they contribute is their duty is mainly to identify exactly a translational researcher or a physician investigator. That's exactly the word that is used globally for a researcher who's very good exposure and has the key knowledge to take all the basic science research and take it to the clinical utility. They're called translational researchers or physician investigators. There may be many among us, but left unidentified by the institution. If the institution could identify them and place it to the young minds, I'm sure the young minds will get ignited by this kind of a translational research. Now, apart from all this, the institution also has got another important duty. Now, the laboratory techniques are very, very powerful. So, the infrastructure definitely should be very, very powerful enough to cater to the needs and resources of a person who is interested to do a translational research. So, if the laboratory setup is not up to the mark, it's not, you don't require really a state of the art. But if it is just resourceful enough for a research to begin with, that's all the more enough for you to have a sustained motivation. When we talk so much about translational research, you must be wondering what exactly the translational research is. So I was just thinking that why not me provide you a template and understanding of what is translational research, so that later on you can key in these kind of research questions together and ask yourself a question whether am I eligible or is my research question eligible for a translational research. So when there was a very interesting study which is taken as a good example for a translational research. Now, once upon a time in Belgium, a cluster of people, a cluster of people died. The reason was they all were food poisoned. So this food poisoning story went into the depth of research, and they found out that this food poisoning was because of a bacteria, Clostridium botulinum. You all must be already aware of it. Now, what was the key thing that happened after this Clostridium botulinum food poisoning mechanism? So the first thing is there was a basic research done with this extract of Clostridium botulinum. It's called as botulinum A toxin. Now, this extract was taken and research was constantly conducted in the basic medical sciences. Now, what they were trying to identify is there any physiological mechanism that they could identify through this botulinum toxin extract? All that they found out finally was that it could actually inhibit neuromuscular transmission. Now, this gave a spark for the clinicians. So the clinicians decided from T0 stage to take it to the T1 stage, where slowly the research from benchside moved to the bedside. So the clinicians took it into a phase 1 clinical trial where they just this extract is nothing but this botulinum toxin extract that they had taken up from the for the bedside research is nothing but the Botox injection. So they took the Botox injection, they injected it to a selective sample of humans, and they finally, after an elaborate research methodologies, they finally came to a key conclusion that this neuromuscular transmission, which it was inhibiting, actually helped to reduce spasticity in post-stroke patients. So that was an excellent finding, and they were quite happy about it. So from T1, they translated it to a phase 2 clinical trial. As I had already told you, clinical trials will take 4 different phases. Now, in phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials, it was tried on a very large population for a long period of time. That word long is for as long as 20 years. So for 20 years, continuously Botox injections were treated for a very long-term period, for a very longer set of population, to identify if their effect is still the same over a long period of time. It reconfirmed that the upper limb spasticity in post-stroke patients could be reduced very well because of Botox injections. And FDA had also gone in after 20 years of clinical trial. Imagine after 20 years. Nowadays, researchers are not patient enough for just a week. But here, after 20 years, they got the approval from FDA for a Botox injection. And then from T2, it went on to a T3 translational stage, where it is in your T3 stage, that is the phase 4 of the clinical trial, they did a lot of drug dosage modifications, and also combination therapies were tried out. So this again went on, and it went on again. The question was, does it really work in the real world? Because you're going to experiment it later on. It will be the drug of choice later on among the human population. So again, it was translated to practice in a T3 model. Finally, it just came up to a T4 clinical trial. Now, in the T4 clinical trial, healthy guidelines for practice of or for usage of this particular dosage of Botox injections to reduce spasticity in post-stroke patients was started, and the healthy guidelines came up. Now, the rest, everything about Botox injections is history. Now, everybody, you can flip through the pages of the fantastic discoveries of medicine, and definitely Botox injection is there. So this is exactly what had happened in our translational research. So it is only now that the boom of translation research is just sowed in the seeds of young minds. But years back, many years back, this actually had taken up shape. And this is how will be the template of a translational research. So the spark here is all the scientific minds gathered here. Make sure that your research question can go really from a benchside to a bedside. It's not just wetting your hands in the lab, writing a paper and finishing it off there. When this translational research, what I spoke to you now, the template looked very rosy, very nice, but it's actually an enormous effort behind. But still, is it that easy? That means does this translational research does not have any block? There is nothing? No, it is definitely an unsolved puzzle even till date. Why? Because all the medical science researches, the speed at which usually a basic medical science research is just translated into clinical utility, the duration or the speed at which it is done is generally very slow, and it is much more lethargic in medical institutions. And secondly, the frequency, which is a very, rarely quantified issue, is the frequency. So how frequent are the bedside research findings which are rolled under the carpet will be taken and escalated to a clinical trial level. That is again a big translational block. Apart from all this, the most important key block that we have here is the dearth of translational investigators. Sometimes the institution can fail to identify a correct translational investigator. So if you're not in the correct hands of a motivated researcher or a motivated physician investigator, then definitely the motivation and the inspiration for young minds will go down. So all the medical institutions, kindly look out for somebody who's highly motivated to guide your students, because for students to work, they need inspiration first. And the next important thing is a message that I want to tell to all the students who come up with brilliant ideas. You come up with brilliant ideas, you can even be tagged with a translational researcher or a physician investigator. But the problem is the students do not have the habit of sharing their knowledge. They do not want to share the research knowledge that they have or a research question that they have. They think once it is shared, it is stolen. Okay, none of the research ideas can be exactly copied. What you manipulate in your mind can never be copied by another person. Each research idea is unique, provided it has got into a right scientific mind. Okay, so for example, if a translational investigator wants to work on on a case of polygenic disorder diseases, so what would he do is a good translational investigator might like to pool in with a population geneticist. He might even like to pool with a man who's got a good skill in bioinformatics, a medical biostatistician, and so on. Only then such collaborative endeavors will take you to the next level, will lead you to real breakthrough discoveries. Now, it is at that point of time the students who are a part of these kind of translational research should not hold back their ideas. The more you share, the better you grow. So you should have a lot of acceptance to exchange your ideas, as well as acceptance of accepting the others' ideas as well. If this is done, the conventional translational blocks, which are in many research minds, would just come to a stop, and collaboration and teaming up would be stunningly interesting. Now, if you do these kind of collaborative endeavors, what will be the final outcome? So the final outcome is you will learn the art of knitting teams which are from different professions, and above all that, every knitting team, take it from me, will definitely come with a streak of a brilliant idea. So when they come with such brilliant ideas, there's a lot of diversity in thinking. When there's a diversity in thinking, you will not be stuck only in the field where you are. So what happens, you just get translated, your research ideas gets broadened, and you move on from an intradisciplinary to a transdisciplinary research, and intra-professional research to a trans-professional research. That is how you come to collaborate with brilliant minds which are coming from different fields of medicine. So you're not confined to one corner, you're just spread across the globe. So that is the biggest advantage of an interprofessional and an interdisciplinary research. And this is an outcome that you will get it only when you open up your minds for both accepting and sharing your ideas. Now, when the research is discussed so much, there is a big role which is to be played by the academic institutions as well. It's not only the medical student who will stand like in any other Indian movie where the hero stands all alone. Not that the student alone can just stand there with a very good research idea in his mind, and just by the end of the song, he becomes a scientist. No, it's never possible. So you need the academic institutions. They are the backbone for medical students who do medical research. So are they really good to researchers? Yes, they are good. But the point is, there are certain small refinements that are required in academic institutions as well. So keeping up the balance between the researcher and the institution, the first thing that I have to consider is revising a little bit of the curriculum. So the curriculum should be revised in such a way that students are exposed to the different research methodologies. And the most important, they should be allocated with a lot of time so that they would enjoy the luxury of research and they breathe research much more comfortably. Okay, because they are already loaded with so much of their medical curriculum and they are already pissed off. They are running for something else when there is so much of medical load in them. So you have to make that something else also equally interesting. So that equally interesting is first giving them a lot of space to enjoy the research. So there is not a particular, hardcore time frame where they have to submit their research publication and things like that. And second is, of course, well-trained mentors, which I've already spoken to you, because motivation is the keyword for young scientists. and conducting conferences and workshops. And this is one of the brilliant thing that is happening almost everywhere in all the medical institutions that I've come across. So everywhere there are intense conferences, intense workshops, and it is nowadays only the students who are getting tired, bored of religious conferences and workshops. But that is not the kind of attitude that you should go about. You should actually be on the keen lookout to gather information out of every workshop and the seminar. And it would be also nice if any medical student does a stunning research or comes up with a breakthrough discovery, and if it is really identifiable, the institution can even give them a short incentive. So just to ignite their minds further and to sustain the motivation. And of course, as I told you, if you don't have infrastructure, your motivation is gone. And next is research and revenue. They're walking hand in hand. Take it from me, without this, there's no research. And the next is, what is an identity crisis about a good research? Now, every translational investigator directly, if you just jump in to tell your student that you have to do a good research, you must be wondering what's a good research. A good research should have at least these components, the major ones that I've listed. A very, very fantastic research question. Okay. Yes, you just do not ask just like that one question and you think that you're already an Einstein there. You definitely come with a logical, scientific research question, a beautiful study design, a fantastic sample size, and of course, your exclusion and inclusion criteria should be very, very stringent so that there is no bias in your study and your results are reproducible even to the general public. And of course, statistical measures should be properly measured, and there's a lot of clarity in interpreting the data, no fudging or manipulating the data. And finally, you are guided even for a manuscript submission, then fantastic. If this all goes hand in hand, then you can raise your collars to say that you've fantastically done a good research. Now, what are the challenges for medical students? They are overloaded with medical curriculum, and then on top of it, you come and say that you suddenly come, you think, you do this, you do that. So they have a lot of challenges. Okay, they have a lot of other entertaining things which are drawing their attention, and on top of it, if you ask them to think, it becomes too much for their gray matter. But yes, there are some challenges. The first important challenge is they don't have adequate knowledge. They are not aware of what to do, even if they are interested to do. And the third important thing, which everyone should genuinely accept, is lack of time. Students are so busy with their regular curriculum that they do not have time for a special research. Faculty, do they have any challenges as well? Faculty definitely have got much more. The pyramid is filled more than what it is pyramid for the student, what it is for the student perspective. Every student thinks it's a cakewalk for the faculty, but the answer is a blunt no. As far as faculty is concerned, they have a lot of a lot of hurdles, and they have a lot of challenges. So the challenges is right from cost management to taking the research to a publication level, designing a study for you. And another alarming question, when an unpredictable result comes, they are much more alarmed than the student. So these are some of the challenges from a faculty perspective. I also want to introduce to you some of the challenges when a medical student starts up the research. There was a series of studies that were done. Now, this study actually took a lot of my attention because there is a lot of barriers in conducting research. But the most stunning barrier that every student thinks is they do not have enough training in research methodologies. You just ask a student, think of a question, do a research. Where will he go? Where will he do if he's not well trained enough? So all institutions pay a kind attention. There is a lack of training for the medical students. And if this training is given to them, and if there are proper professional supervisors to guide them, definitely they will come up with beautiful research questions. And what is the medical student? I discussed so many kinds of research categories, but then what will a medical student fall into? Where does he start from? What is the kind of research? Most of the medical students, when a survey was done, they're more interested to do a cross-sectional research where they will identify a disease in a particular population during a particular point of time alone, and they want to present it. So that is the kind of a cross-sectional research which has taken a lot of interest for the medical students. So what are the common barriers? Not only in medical research, generally, if there is a word called research, there are a lot of common barriers. What are the barriers? First important barrier is a demand for a quantity rather than quality. Now, this is it's like a stigma. Now, everywhere, and you need quantity, but not quality. So what happens? Automatically, there is a demand for quantity and there is a dilution in the quality of research. And another biggest caption that everybody in the field of research will know is either you publish or you perish. Okay, research, they want it like an instant coffee or an instant noodles. They just want an answer. Tonight you sleep and tomorrow morning you could become the Einstein. It's not possible. We're not watching movies where at the end of just one song you brilliantly become a researcher. No. Any proper research, as you saw when it went through the clinical trials, only phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials took 20 years to perform at its peak. So it's not the question of whether you publish or perish. It is not at all feasible. Okay. And another thing is, students have also become equally notorious in publishing false findings. Please avoid this. And non-reproducible results with sample bias, and there are a lot of errors in experimental design. This happens mostly when you're not in the right hands of a researcher. And there is a lot of fear of negative results. Above all this, all of us are very scared when you get an insignificantly significant p-value. You almost, you are waiting to get that p-value. If that p-value, if that significance does not come, then everybody are very scared to present their results. But actually speaking, nowadays there are a lot of journals which are very open-minded to take in insignificant p-values and still go ahead to publish it. And there are, of course, ignorance in research methodologies. Ethics are compromised in most of the places. And the last one important thing is command over a scientific writing language. This is a skill which you have to develop it, and it will happen only over a period of time. Okay, so you need to keep writing and writing, then you learn the art of the scientific writing, because that adds a lot of value. That because knowing science is a different criteria, but convincing others with your science knowledge through a scientific writing is actually the key success. So the whole research process that I spoke to you can be just put in a nutshell. This is exactly what you have to do in your entire research process. So this should be the main take-home message for everybody gathered here. So this is what a research process is, and this is what you can do it, irrespective of whether it's bedside or bedside. The fundamental process is one and the same here. So after listening to this intense talk, where do I go from here? It's too much of information, as usual, just like a classroom. So it's too much of information, but where do I go from here? Remember what you want to research. And first identify where you will get the support. How would you build your network? Okay. And be please positive about all the new avenues that's coming up. Okay. Now, even a small pinch just pulls you down. That's not the way. Even if a rock falls on you, you should be just moving forward. Be very curious to explore and be very confident to expand your knowledge further. And the most important in the field of research, and especially in the fraternity of medicine, is you have to take somebody and start following them very well. Okay, in the very good sense, you can follow somebody as your role model. Try to establish contact with them so that you grow holistically along with the growth of your medical curriculum. So knowing is just not enough. We must apply. So today what I have told you is just knowing, okay? But you must start to apply it. And just willing to do research is not enough. We all must gather together to do research. So that's exactly what you should all think back. When you think back, you should just go ahead and just think of performing a good, very patiently, well-oriented research. So I'm wishing all the young minds and everybody who have gathered here for all the success in your research. But remember, a good research requires a lot of curiosity from you, a lot of exploratory minds, a lot of inquisitiveness to know what it is. And above all this, you need a lot of perseverance. Okay, patience and perseverance is the key word, and then only you will know what's new and what's improving further. If there is no curiosity quotient in you, research is not the kind of platter for you. So with this, I thank you. I thank my research as well as the research mentors who guided me through all this time. And of course, I thank the entire platform here that was given for me to share a little bit of the knowledge that I had about research and how young minds should get equally, happy to do research further in their life. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so
Ramya.
much for your wonderful presentation. It was very informative, and it was very encouraging, ma'am, for the students. And we'll move on to the question session now, ma'am.
Thank you, Deepa. It was excellent lecture. Okay, you
Thank
have
you.
explained clearly about basic research, translational research, and then in detail about barriers in research, and then about students' perspectives and so on. We have no questions. Actually, only one basic question is asked over here. Why is PICO used in research? How to frame a good PICO question? That's the only question.
Uh, okay. So I would not be in a great position to guide you on this exactly, ideally speaking. So I think I would just not discuss on this because I'm not into the depth of the field of your thing that you're asking. So I'm very sorry. I would be more on a general norms of explaining with the research. I don't want to give any other
There must
information.
be any question, I feel. Huh? You have explained very clearly, right? Only
Thank
this
you
was
very
a question. How to frame a PICO question. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepa, then. Thank you once again.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you especially for Balaji Dental College and all the esteemed people who invited me. Thanks especially to Dr. Sumati and the moderator, Dr. Ramya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for accepting our invite and giving us a wonderful presentation. I would also like to thank the institution, Sri Balaji Dental College and Hospital, Dr. Sumati Jones, ma'am, head of the Department of Pharmacology, for conducting the series of webinar on DentoPharm. And I also like to thank the principal, Dr. Jimson sir, and the organizing committee, Dr. Satish and NP Murli. A special thanks to Dr. Nishad Sheikh and Angelin from Doc Mode organization for the technical support. And thank you, Vinayak, for the technical help. And once again, I thank the participants also for participating today. And we'll meet next week with different topics. Thank you.